Naruto as a series, in my humble opinion, is one of the greatest stories ever told. However, there would be no Naruto without Hunter x Hunter. Whether it be the inspiration for the sharingan or the power system as a whole, Naruto emulates Hunter x Hunter in many ways. So I thought it would be interesting to plug the main cast of the Hunter x Hunter series into one of the most iconic arcs in Naruto and see how they do. And the arc I'd like to explore in particular is the one where boys became men, the Sasuke Retrieval arc. In other words, today we'll be exploring and breaking down Gon, Killua, and Kurapika versus the Sasuke Retrieval Mission. When talking about how these characters will do in this particular setting, we have to go over a few stipulations, but I think before that it's worth mentioning that I am not doing this by myself. The same guy I had on my previous Hunter x Hunter video, one of the GOATs, Satori, is here with me today. Go ahead and say what's up, brother.
What's up? Happy to be here.
It's always good to have Satori on the channel. I'm always glad to have him on here. If you guys are not subbed to him, go sub to him. He's got great One Punch Man content, a whole bunch of just fantastic stuff over there. So go sub to him. But Satori, you want to sort of explain the structure we'll be doing, sort of like some of the stipulations, etc.?
Basically, what we're going to be doing here is just taking Gon, Killua, and Kurapika, the three main combatants of Hunter x Hunter, and we're going to be placing them in the spot that the Sasuke Retrieval team was in originally. So instead of Naruto and the gang, it's going to be these three going after the Sound 4 in the exact same conditions. So eventually the Sand Shinobi arrive. The Sound 4 are also somewhat worn down from their battle against two Jonin prior. And their mission is to get Sasuke back to the village by any means necessary, and they will try to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, so that pretty much lays it out. And just one final thing, going to be verse equalization. So essentially chakra equals nen, nen equals chakra. So, you know, if we were having a battle with someone who could absorb chakra, then they would be able to absorb nen, right? So I think it's just the most fair way to go about it. That way there's no like, oh, well, they don't have chakra, so they can't be manipulated by genjutsu or anything like that. So that pretty much lays the groundwork of it. I do think that it's worth going into the scaling very, very briefly. We did go over it prior in the Gon and Killua versus the Chunin exams video, but essentially we were able to get their speed slightly above the speed of the high tiers from the Chunin exams. The high tiers in the Chunin exams are somewhere around 25 to 35 times the speed of sound in base. They can get even higher when they power up, and then Gon and Killua, and then, you know, Kurapika by extension, are just a little bit higher than that. You can get them all the way up to around Mach 50 or even higher in their base forms. So they're not like a full blitz tier above those top tiers, like Neji and Naruto and K and Zero, Sasuke with his Sharingan active, things like that. But they are faster than them by a degree that might be noticeable. And then in terms of their attack potency and durability, they generally scale somewhere around town level, small town to large town level, based on their interactions with the Chimera ants. Do you want to kind of touch on this really quickly and add any context that you think is necessary?
Yeah, so basically we have several attacks in Hunter x Hunter that have been calced to city block level, multi-city block, small town level. In particular, this one Chimera ant just literally farts on Killua with a small town level attack, and then Killua just blocks it with his bare hands, and he's pissed off that he farted on him instead of being mad at the attack itself. So, yeah, Gon scales to Killua for the most part, and then Kurapika is able to brawl with Uvogin, and he's physically a little bit weaker, but he's still able to block a Big Bang impact from Uvogin. Uvogin is the same guy who Chrollo, the leader of the Phantom Troop, thinks cannot be beaten in physical combat, Chrollo being the same guy who can box with Zoldix, who can one-shot squadron leaders who are way stronger than that small town level ant. So we just have these characters pretty high into those town level ranges.
We'll go individually into what the scaling looks like for the Sound 4 once we get to them. But one final thing, at any point in time, these guys do have power-ups they can access if they need to. So that is their baseline scaling, but just for anybody who's like, that's not true, they can go in the... Just hold off, we might get there eventually. But just wanted to lay the groundwork for that before we move on to their first matchup. So the first matchup they're going to have is just like the first matchup that Team Sasuke Retrieval had, and it's Jirobo. So I think this goes very similarly at the beginning, but then very differently towards the end. Do you want to talk about how you think this matchup goes?
Yeah, so first of all, we're gonna have the team. At first, they're gonna be kind of jumped, because they're gonna trigger the trap still, because Kidomaru uses webs to like track people's movements and whatnot, and if they just trip on the webs or just startle them in any way, Kidomaru knows. So they're not gonna be really prepared for something like that. They're more experienced than the Naruto squad was at this point. Like, Killua was an assassin, Kurapika's in shady businesses with mafias and whatnot, but they're not gonna be suspecting webs, you know? So they're gonna get flushed out, they're gonna be detected, just like the original team was, and then Jirobo would attempt to trap them with the Earth Dome. And this is where the scenario sort of splits into two possible outcomes. So in one, they get trapped, and then the other Sound Ninja take off. And in the other, they dodge the trap, and Jirobo still probably just tells the other Sound Ninja to just scram, because he's like that. He just wants all of them for himself, pretty much in character. So how do you think these scenarios go?
Yeah, so in scenario A, when they get trapped, just like it happened in the original events, like, Jirobo is like, this is my snack, you guys get out of here, like, leave it to me. Like, he's this, like, big blundering idiot that just, like, wants to take them on by himself. But in that scenario, like, we know that they were able to see the chakra flow throughout the walls of the dome, and that's how they were able to identify, like, or part of how they were able to identify the weak point in the dome, and then they were able to launch an attack on that weak part to break out. Well, Gon, Killua, and Kurapika, with their level of mastery over Nen, should be able to do something similar, because just like the Byakugan allows for you to see the flow of chakra, they have an ability called Gyo, where they can focus their Nen into their eyes and, like, see the flow of Nen, see, like, how things are working.
Yep, they can even see concealed Nen, because, like, there are techniques in Hunter x Hunter that specifically conceal your Nen, making it invisible even to Nen users, and then Gyo can see through that. So it's just like, we have, like, Nen is invisible to normal people, then we have Nen is visible to chakra users, or Nen users, you know, whatever, the same thing in this case, and then we have a technique that conceals it from them, and then we have a technique that can see that, so it's just like multiple levels of see-through. Like, they're definitely seeing the chakra, they're definitely breaking out pretty easily.
This is another important thing to point out. They're far more seasoned than this team was. Like, the Gon, Killua, and Kurapika, we're taking their feats through the entire series, and so, you know, they've been through so many different missions, they've encountered so many different enemies, they also have incredibly high battle IQ to, like, start off with, so I do think they would know, like, oh, okay, attack the weak point, go. And a Jajanken from Gon should just one-tap it, I think. Like, Choji is, if he, with his AP, with the human boulder, can break through that, I see no reason why Jajanken couldn't.
Yeah, Choji was like the laughing stock of the Genin. Meanwhile, Gon is this 1 in a million, 10 million prodigy even.
Yeah, so he would have absolutely no issue breaking out of this, and then it's just going to be those three facing off against Jirobo. At that point, I do think that it would turn into like a 1v1 like it did prior to, but I think it would end really quickly because Jirobo in base just doesn't scale to these guys, especially when he's fatigued here. Like, he kind of has to go up a notch into his curse mark states in order to, like, get a speed advantage of any kind. And then his durability isn't ultra impressive until he goes into his curse mark states. So I honestly think that you could see a situation where Killua just, like, runs at him and rips his heart out, and then they just move on. Yeah, they just go on their merry way. And that's scenario A.
Yeah, also, just to quickly mention, like, why Killua would be the one left behind. In character, first of all, he just takes first fights a lot of the time. Because, like, for example, in Greed Island, there's this one big guy that wants to wrestle and whatnot. And then Killua's like, okay, let's go. So, he's already just, like, prone to taking on guys like Jirobo, just, like, cocky big dudes who want to fight. And second of all, he can catch up very quickly if he uses Godspeed for just a second to, like, boost himself and jump very fast. So he wouldn't be wasting too much energy with, like, just 1 second of Godspeed, so it's just logical for him to stay back and then just quickly finish the fight and then try to catch up as soon as possible.
Yeah. Scenario B, they would just dodge the dome, and then the same thing happens. The rest take off, Killua kills him very quickly, and then he catches up to the squad. And then we move on to our next matchup. So the second matchup that they're going to face is, again, the same one that the original team would have faced, which is Kidomaru. Now, I will say, Kidomaru might be a little bit more on alert because they folded Jirobo so quickly, but I do think he takes a similar approach to what he did before in trying to catch him in his webbing. So how do you think this sort of plays out here?
Alright, so they probably do get caught in the webbing. I don't see why they wouldn't really be. Like, the speed edge is there, but it's not like a blitz tier higher or anything. So, what do they do if they get caught in the webbing? Well, Kurapika does have the Nen chains, or at this point they would be like chakra chains as well. So if you think that chakra attacks just cancel out the webbing, then there you go, the chains just pierce it. Same with Gon and his scissors, because he can basically just produce a chakra scalpel, except like sword-sized. But if you think that the specific thing that's needed to cut the webs is targeting chakra flow, because like there is some evidence to this. For one, Neji is the only one who can do it in the original, obviously, but second of all, in the Sasuke and Itachi versus Kabuto fight, instead of going for Susanoo swords against the webbing, they go for Amaterasu specifically. Now, it might just be because it's faster, more convenient, or whatever. It might not indicate that chakra swords generally don't work on these webs, but, you know, they might still work, so they might be able to break out. But even if they don't, Killua's gonna be finished so fast. He's gonna catch up so fast. He's gonna see Kidomaru gloating about his webs and whatnot, and just sneak him from behind and just stab his neck or stab his spine.
Even if there are like a few minutes that, you know, pass between the time, which I think honestly he probably beats up Jirobo really quickly. Like Jirobo was facing off against, again, Choji, who was able to keep up with him whenever he had the green pill while he was in base. And it's like, do we really think that Killua is not just like a green pill plus level above base Choji? I do. So he's going to catch up incredibly quick. And then when he does, he has two options, really. He could either like jump in and start firing shots at him and like try to engage with him. Or what we think he would do is, like Satsuri said, just like blitz around him, conceal his presence, and then come up behind him and like just kill him, like rip his heart out or something. Because even like Neji is able to kind of get a sneak attack off on him, and even though he does like dodge it last second, Neji being slower than this version of Killua and still being able to like almost tag him would just lend credence to the idea that Killua should be able to get him if Neji can almost get him, you know what I mean? So
yeah, Killua has been killing people since age 5. He's an assassin through and through. Like, he, in character, he's sneaking up on people and killing them. So yeah, I just think pretty blatant GG sneak attack here.
Yeah, well, and the thing is too, you know, even if you assume that a few minutes pass, it doesn't really matter because, like, all he's going to do is have Kurapika and Gon trapped in the webbing, and he's just going to be, like, sitting back at a distance throwing his little, like, you know, yellow web scythe things, and they have abilities called Ryu and Ko, where they can, like, focus their aura to one particular area of their body or, like, you know, focus it defensively and just like enhance parts of their body defensively. So I could see a scenario where like Gon gets trapped in the webbing like Naruto did, and as he's just like throwing these little knife things at him, if it's going towards his shoulder, he just enhances his shoulder. If it's going towards his arm, he enhances his arm, you know? So like it really is a significant amp to their defense, especially in the case of Ko, because you put all of your like focus on that one particular area, so whatever his base durability would be overall is then amped by multiple times by pouring all of that energy into one spot, you know.
And just really quickly, for how much of an amp Ko and Ryo are, when Bisky first demonstrates it, she focuses her aura in her fist and just moves it at snail speed towards the kids, and then they try to block and they get just sent flying. Like, the boost is insane, so same would apply defensively. They would get way more durable, so
yeah. So I do think that Kidomaru would be able to slow them down slightly by trapping them in the webbing, but then by the time Killua shows up, it's pretty much over. So they beat him up and move on to their next matchup. The next matchup is Tayuya and Sakon. So basically, in the original, whenever Naruto and Ko landed, the Sakon just charges them off rip. So in that scenario, Satri, how do you think this fight goes?
So what happens in the original is Sakon charges at the team, and the same thing happens here. And he charges, Kurapika maybe fires some chains at him, and Sakon dodges and whatnot, Gon engages with him physically, and then the three of them scrap. But Killua, in the original, what happens is the team uses Naruto and his shadow clones as like distractions to try to sneak Tayuya from the side. And the hunter team, being more seasoned and probably more intelligent at this point than Shikamaru, because again, they're like end of series selves, you know, and there's three of them compared to one Shikamaru who's still inexperienced. So they would definitely be able to think of the same strategy. And Killua, being the stealthiest and, you know, assassin of the group, he would be probably the one who's sent to the side to go for Tayuya. And, I mean, Tayuya's dying. I mean, let's be honest. The sneak attack is just gonna kill her.
If she can get... Dude, if she can get taken off guard by Shikamaru, like, and she can get caught in that shadow possession by Shikamaru, then she's definitely being sneak attacked by Killua, and he's not going to catch her in a shadow paralysis. He's going to take her head off. So,
yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, they're like, Killua, what he does, against the random, like, serial killer guy, rips his heart out. Against Machi, tries to rip her heart out. Against the Chimera Ant Rabbit, rips his head off. Against the Chimera Ant Rhino, he rips his heart out again. So, like, he goes for the heart and the head all the time. He knows the vitals. He's not gonna play around. These are his enemies. He's gonna go for the kill. And, like, he's more than capable of pulling that off. So, when that happens, Sakon is just gonna be left alone. Like, he's surrounded by enemies from all sides. And when he sees Tayuya go down, and he knows that the other two teammates he had, Kidomaru and Jirobo, both went down so fast, because this is all happening way faster than in the original, because they're cleaning up way faster. So he's gonna see this, and he's gonna just straight up get scared and go into CM2 right away, because there's no other option. Like, his team just got squad wiped. So he's definitely going CM2. First person to actually be able to break into the curse mark, by the way. So how do you think that goes down?
Yeah, so I think, honestly, whenever he looks over at Tayuya, he probably does immediately go CM2, but as he's looking away, Kurapika, being the genius he is and having the abilities he does, probably attempts to use Judgment Chain on him to gather intel on Orochimaru. Because remember, in verse, they're not just trying to get Sasuke back, we're putting them in the same scenario, in like the same mind frame that the original team was in, which is like, not only do they want to save their comrade, but also there's this like snake devil dude who's like trying to like take over his body and just attacked the Hidden Leaf Village and is like this massive threat to society. So,
and they also know he's weakened, so they would want to just sneak him in his hideout. They want his location, they want his home address.
Yeah, exactly. So if they can get any bit of intel on Oro here, I think they would take a chance. And I mean, after mowing down 3 of the Sound 4 fairly easily, they haven't seen the Curse Mark 2 states yet. They're probably like, oh, we can take this guy down. Sakon goes CM2, and I think Kurapika's like, okay, we're not taking any chances here. Judgment Chain's coming out. And I think in the same way that he did prior, I think like the first time we see him use Judgment Chain, he basically just says, yeah, tell me the truth or you die. So he does have kind of a counter for Sakon's abilities, kind of, but then also, like, we'll get into in a second how CM2 might be kind of a counter for that as well. But what's important is, I think at this moment, Kimimaro shows up. So while Sakon is like in this really sticky situation, surrounded by 3 enemies, I do think with Kimimaro's stealth, his speed, his abilities, I do think he'd be able to just like show up on the coffin and take it and go. But in true Kimimaro fashion, he's probably going to say something to Sakon to belittle him, and then move on. So at this point in time, Kurapika, with the Judgment Chain around Sakon's heart, will probably look at Gon and Killua and say, go on ahead, like, I've got him. But this is where things get really interesting with CM2. You want to talk about how, like, maybe his abilities interact with Judgment Chain?
Yeah, so Sakon, what he can do is he can basically manipulate his body on like a cellular level and even lower than that, like even smaller. So, what if he just shapeshifts his heart out of the chain?
Yeah.
Because he can do that. He can straight up enter people's bodies and like manipulate their molecules as well as his. So, him just like shifting his hearts, like positioning won't change anything because the chain is wrapped around the heart, but he could just shift its form or just dissolve it and then just have it reappear elsewhere in his body and just completely counter the judgment chain. So that actually is pretty entertaining, but at this point, the ultimate axe comes out. For those of you who haven't read the manga, we're not gonna spoil any fights, but Kurapika basically has something called the steel chain. And what that is basically Crollo's ability, but like on steroids. He has no conditions, he just pierces you with a syringe on a chain, and then he steals your ability. And even more than that, whenever the target is pierced, they are put in a state of Zetsu. And what that means is their aura is suppressed, and they cannot use it. So in this case, Sakon is just immobilized, cannot use chakra, and gets his parasite jutsu stolen. Which is, by the way, that's completely cringe, because Crollo is way cooler and his ability has way more restrictions for some reason, but Kurapika can just do this, apparently? Like,
Yeah, no, Kurapika's busted, bro. Like, Kurapika definitely has, like, one of the sickest power sets, or one of the sickest move sets in the entire series, and this ability is just broken. So I do think that he probably does end up stealing that ability at some point, but only after his body gets invaded.
yeah.
And because, like, I do think so, right, that he has the judgment chain around his heart, and Sakon, demolecularizes, gets his heart away from it, and he's probably like, okay, that's an interesting ability, I'd like that. But I do think that Sakon would probably engage him in close range combat, try to take over his body, and then Kurapika's really gonna want the ability.
Yeah.
And so in the same way that Kiba stabbed himself to get Sakon out of his body, I think that Kurapika would do the same thing here, but the difference is he has the holy chain, which just allows for him to regen.
Yep.
So instead of like being wounded afterwards, he's just gonna be fine. So not only does he get basically a full recovery, he also then gets this ability that allows for him to change his molecular structure and invade the bodies of other people.
It's insane. Kurapika is too busted. Please nerf.
Yeah, so I do think that he ends up beating up Sakon. It will take some time, because Sakon's abilities are kind of difficult to figure out, and he does kind of like tell you how they work, but it's at least gonna be the amount of time it takes for him to demolecularize his heart, get free of the judgment chain, engage in close combat, take over his body, and then all the rest of it. And something else that's really interesting at this point in time too is that Kurapika does have this ability called Emperor Time, which is his Scarlet Eyes, what the Sharingan was actually made after. And what it does is it amps him to 100% efficiency in all areas. If you guys aren't super familiar with it, basically, let's put it this way. So Nen is broken up into separate categories. The utilization of Nen is broken up into its own specific categories, and basically you have 6 different types of things that you can do to like utilize your specific ability. And if you specialize on one side, I'll just put a chart up on screen. If you specialize like in the top node, then the bottom node's gonna only be able to work at 40%, and then as you get closer to that node, you can operate in the other ones at higher efficiencies. But what this allows for him to do is use all of them at maximum efficiency. So not only would he have the ability to steal Sakon's abilities, he would also have the ability to utilize other types of Nen abilities that he wouldn't necessarily use typically in battle, because they wouldn't be as efficient as they would be here. So he has a million different things he can do here once he taps into that. And yeah, he just ends up beating Sakon and moving on. Is there anything else you want to add to this before we move on to the next section?
Yeah, Emperor Time is just completely ridiculous. For one, it shaves off his lifespan, which is a good cost, but it's not enough of a cost, to be honest, because we have Uvogin, this guy who devoted his life to just maxing out his DPS, his durability, his physical stats are off the charts. Kurapika comes in and just blocks the Big Bang impact, the biggest thing Uvogin has in his disposal, and all he's left with is a broken arm. Meanwhile, that can disintegrate normal dudes, so...
Yeah, so he beats up Sakon while Gon and Killua face off against Kimimaro. So in this matchup, I'm going to be honest with you guys, Gon and Killua do have like the speed and reaction and all of that stuff, and like the abilities necessary like physically, I think, to keep up with Kimimaro. You know, they can amplify their own bodies to sort of negate some of his attacks, dodge all of the attacks that he launches at them, at least while he's in base form. But I don't think that they have any actual win cons here. So, like, how do you think this, like, the early portion of this goes? Because it is important to note that, like, Kimimaro doesn't go into his curse mark states until he absolutely needs to, because he's just waiting for Sasuke to pop out of the coffin. So he's like, okay, like, I'm just gonna use the absolute minimum level of effort I possibly have to so that I can defend Sasuke as long as possible so he can get to Orochimaru. So, like, I think he would just stay in his base form until they force him to move up, and I don't really think that any of their abilities or anything is going to force him to evolve anywhere past like CM1.
Yeah, I think so as well, because the guy gets crushed by a mega sand coffin and he's fine. Like, he has some level of regeneration, which it's just gonna help him out. If he somehow takes damage, it's just gonna heal. Like, even his eyeballs, because, like, normally what I say for Killua whenever he's going up against, like, a durable opponent is he can at least take out the eyes and whatnot, because he's an assassin, he'd think of that. But even his eyeballs tanked the sand coffin, so I guess Kimimara's eyeballs can just take lightning to the face, probably, and just remain intact, so... They really can't do anything to damage him. Like, a fully charged Jonken might knock him back, but it probably is not damaging him, because those bones are crazy. But, at the same time, as you said, they do have the speed to just keep up and keep him at bay, so it's pretty much a stalemate for the time being until somebody else shows up, and then things get more interesting.
Yeah, so you may have noticed that we hadn't mentioned the Sand siblings yet, and that's because at this point in time, they're kind of like moving through this faster than the OG team would have. So, Gaara's not the one who shows up. Kurapika does.
Also, by the way, technically Kimimaro wouldn't show up either, because, like, he only came because the Sound 4 were taking too long. And so I guess he really doesn't even show up here, but let's say he did, because, like, why? It's more interesting that way.
For the sake of, like, for the sake of the plot, you know, we want Kimimaro to show up. But whenever he does, you know, takes off the coffin, blah, 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 faces Gon and Killua, then Kurapika shows up, and I think what would happen is they would be like, yeah, we're trying to get the coffin away, but this dude just, like, he's super durable, we can't land any physical blows on him, we're just not able to do anything. I think Killua may even think about going Godspeed, but I'm not sure if he actually would do it, because I'm not sure if it would even, like, really matter here. Like, even if he's way faster, he's not going to be able to actually, like, harm him with Godspeed, I think. So there'd really be no reason for him to do it. So then when Kurapika shows up, they're like, dude, we got nothing. Is there anything you can do? And his chains will not be able to pierce him. But he did just steal the ability to enter his body.
I can't.
So I do think Kurapika would be like, actually, I might have the perfect ability for this. So then Kurapika engages him. Maybe Gon and Killua are, like, firing some of their projectile shots at him to keep him, you know, kind of contained into one spot. And then eventually Kurapika gets a hold of him and uses Sakon's ability against him. Now, when this happens, he probably tells Gon and Killua to take off. Like, he's got this handled. And I do think that they would, but you could also argue that they stay behind as support just in case. So how do you think this kind of goes from here?
Yeah, so I think either way, they're not really gonna want to abandon Kurapika, and there's kind of no rush to get back, because they don't know Sasuke's on a timer to pop out of that barrel, and they just know there's one enemy left, so why not just team up on him? So basically, I personally think they would stay behind, and how this fight goes is Kurapika just tries to kill Sakon, tries to use Sakon's ability to kill Kimimaro. Kimimaro heals, and he can stab himself, but then Kurapika heals. And it's just sort of a never-ending circle. Like, Kurapika might have to leave Kimimaro's body to heal, to wrap the chain around himself, but then he just enters back in and we just resume. Yeah. So it's just like, they just sort of take turns just stabbing each other and seeing who has more pain endurance and whatnot. I guess that's a good debate, because like Kimimaro's entire existence is he just devoted to Orochimaru, to serving him. He wants to succeed. Kurapika has insane willpower as well, so like, they just sort of take turns just stabbing each other over and over again until either Kurapika runs out of aura or Kimimaro just dies from his illness, from pushing himself too far. So what do you think is more likely to happen first?
Well, honestly, I think because Kimimaro, like pretty much right after going into CM2 dies, like, I mean, I'm talking like the same chapter pretty much. Like, he goes into CM2, executes a couple moves, gets crushed, pops out of the thing, and dies. Yep. So I think it's far more likely that what would happen is he would eventually, you know, push himself to CM2, and at that point, he would have a physical advantage over these guys. He would, like, I mean, the Sakon ability, like, may not even work against him when he's in CM2. I mean, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't, but, like, just because of the overall chakra output, you could argue that, like, it wouldn't matter. But once he goes into CM2, I do think that it's only a matter of time before he just collapses. So maybe he could take down one or two of them. But if Kurapika, again, uses the Scarlet Eyes, that amps him as well. We also have Killua with his Godspeed. He could, like, amp himself, like, keep himself and Gon away from any of the attacks coming their way. So they would just be able to unironically kind of, like, outlast him and evade him until he dies. Or, you know, if the fight carries on long enough and, like, they just go back and forth while he's in CM1 and he never gets pushed to CM2, then eventually Gaara shows up and it just goes exactly as it did before. So yeah. I think that there's a very real possibility that, like, it ends way sooner than it did before, which means that Sasuke doesn't pop out of the coffin. If he does pop out of the coffin, it would happen before Gaara gets there, so I don't think Gaara shows up because of how much faster this has been going, but I do think Kimimaro would eventually just, like, collapse. Like, he would be basically forced to go CM2 a lot earlier just because of the circumstances that he's in. So I do think he probably dies first. Maybe you could argue he takes out one of them. I don't know. I mean, I think they should be fine, but at the end of the day, Kimimaro ends up dying, and they head back to the village with the coffin in hand. So this is where it does get kind of weird, because again, we don't think the Sand siblings have shown up yet because it wouldn't have taken as long for them to complete this mission. But eventually, like, so Sasuke pops out of the coffin before the Sand siblings get there, like, significantly before. So I do think on the way back to Konoha, Sasuke pops out of the coffin. Yep. And how do you think this interaction goes?
Okay, so Sasuke, at this point, he's very fresh with CM2, and he doesn't have a 3-Tomoe Sharingan yet. He only has the 2-Tomoe. I don't know, dude. Like, him versus an exhausted Kurapika and a relatively fresh Gon and Killua, because they didn't really have to expend themselves that much. I don't really know, because, like, Sasuke, where does he scale at this point? He just significantly above Naruto, who is also significantly below Kimimaro at that point. So, like, I think he should be, at most, relative to Kimimaro, who we already established Gon and Killua can react to, except Sasuke doesn't have that god durability, so he probably can be stunned by lightning palms and lightning bolts. He probably could be significantly damaged by a Jijanken to the ribs or whatnot. I would imagine worst case scenario, Killua goes Godspeed while Gon charges up a massive Jijanken, and then Killua just straight up places Gon right in front of Sasuke. Like, perception blitzes both of them, just teleports Gon to Sasuke, and then Gon just lands the hit, and then just kind of knocks him out.
Well, and the thing is, too, like, they would be at a slight disadvantage because I think he'd be more willing to kill them than they would be to kill him, because their whole mission is to bring him back. But they would not be shy about breaking all of his bones. Like, you know, like, I think Gon would be like, dude, I will break your legs and drag you back if I need to. Because, again, we're putting them in the same mind frame that, you know, the Sasuke Retrieval team initially was in. So Yeah, I do think that he just kind of gets juggled here by these three behemoths.
And then Kurapika, he recovers enough as the fight goes on to invade his body with the parasite jutsu too.
Yeah, and just forcibly brings him back. Yeah, so I do think that he does get brought back. They are successful in the mission. Definitely let us know if you guys want to see anything else. But if you guys made it this far, you know, definitely like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, go sub to Satori, and you know, until next time, you guys have an awesome day.